Chapter 903. The Heavenly Bao continent was facing the joint attack of the three emperor gods. Ingui was also very anxious. Seeing Yi Xing stand up, Ingui's eyes lit up. Yi Xing, you have completed the transformation? Yi Xing opened his god's eyes of Voidbreaker and saw the three real gods attacking the Heavenly Bao continent. The Heavenly Bao continent could not hold on for much longer. Yi Xing retracted his gaze and nodded with a smile. I have completed it. Senior Ingui, how can I go to the Star Secret Realm? Ingui said. In the Heavenly Bao Palace, there is a restriction formation that leads to the deepest part of the Star Secret Realm. You only need to use the Sagittarius constellation to activate it. Alright. Yi Xing used the Sagittarius constellation with a thought. The inner palace of the Heavenly Bao Palace immediately sensed it. Dense formation runes appeared in the void. It was an extremely complicated teleportation formation. Kacha, the coffin in the inner palace, suddenly made a soft sound, and a figure floated out of the coffin. Ingui immediately flew toward the figure and said excitedly, Master. The figure was real god Tiangong. Yi Xing also hurriedly bowed. Senior Heavenly Bao. Real god Tiangong nodded at Ingui and his gaze fell on Yi Xing. My last wish has finally been fulfilled. Young man, you are very good. This teleportation formation will send you to the deepest part of the Star Secret Realm, and you will start the core trial of the Star Secret Realm directly. I wish you good luck in obtaining the true inheritance of Star Sovereign, and the method to become a supreme martial artist. As he spoke, real god Tiangong waved his hand, and the silver dragon heaven shooting bow that was fighting with the Dark Star Emperor disappeared from the sky of the Heavenly Bao continent, and appeared in real god Tiangong's hand. Then real god Tiangong waved his hand, and the silver dragon heaven shooting bow flew into his hand. Real god Tiangong's figure started to fade and he continued. Go, the silver dragon heaven shooting bow is a treasure that I obtained from the Star Secret Realm. May it accompany you and bring you good luck. As soon as he finished speaking, real god Tiangong's figure completely disappeared. Real god Tiangong had already passed away for 20,000 years, and he had only used a special method to seal a bit of his consciousness. Now that the seal had been removed, he naturally wouldn't exist for long, and he would vanish from the universe. Plus, it was because the consciousness was too small that real god Tiangong didn't notice the willpower of soul that the Dark Star Emperor had left in Yi Xing's body. If real god Tiangong was still alive, and Yi Xing was in front of him, real god Tiangong would definitely notice. At the same time that real god Tiangong's figure disappeared, the teleportation formation in the inner hall took effect completely. Yi Xing was instantly pulled into the dimensional void, and he was shuttling through the void at an extremely fast speed in the teleportation tunnel. No. The Dark Star Emperor knew that Yi Xing had left the Heavenly Bao continent and headed towards the Star Secret Realm, and he roared furiously. Originally, Yi Xing was a disciple of the Dark Star Divine Palace. Moreover, the Dark Star Emperor had noticed this disciple and summoned him once. If he wanted to capture Yi Xing then, it would be a piece of cake. However, fate made fools of people. At that time, the Dark Star Emperor didn't know that Yi Xing possessed the supreme astrology. By the time he found out, it was already too late. Yi Xing had already entered the Heavenly Bao continent. In order to control Yi Xing, the Dark Star Emperor didn't hesitate to destroy the entire Heavenly Bao continent. He didn't hesitate to take out 10 upper-grade god-level treasures and asked Emperor Xinghe and Emperor Guang to attack together. For the past 20,000 years, among all the treasures that were produced in the Heavenly Bao continent, there wasn't a single upper-grade god-level treasure. The total value of all the treasures produced couldn't be compared to the 10 upper-grade god-level treasures that the Dark Star Emperor had taken out. The Dark Star Emperor had paid such a huge price, but he still couldn't get what he wanted. Seeing that the Heavenly Bao continent's prohibition formation was about to be completely destroyed, Yi Xing once again changed his location and escaped from his control. Moreover, the place that Yi Xing headed to this time was the Star Secret Realm. That was the real forbidden area of the real gods. In the Heavenly Bao continent, the Dark Star Emperor could still use force. However, in the Star Secret Realm, the Dark Star Emperor couldn't do anything at all. Trying to break open the Star Secret Realm by force? Not to mention 1 Dark Star Emperor. Even 10 Dark Star Emperors or 100 Dark Star Emperors working together wouldn't be able to break through the Star Secret Realm. Martial Tao Supremes were more than just a little stronger than real gods. It was like the difference between a mortal and a god. Once Yi Xing entered the Star Secret Realm, he was completely out of the Dark Star Emperor's control. Other than waiting, the Dark Star Emperor couldn't do anything at all. After paying such a huge price for nothing, how could the Dark Star Emperor not be angry? He started to attack randomly. Emperor Xinghe and Emperor Guang quickly stopped and retreated far away. The current Dark Star Emperor was almost crazy. Both of them felt a little scared. After a few breaths, the Dark Star Emperor finally calmed down. Emperor Xinghe asked, "Dark Star Emperor, are we still going to break the Heavenly Bao Continent's prohibition spell?" The Dark Star Emperor had nowhere to vent his anger. He blamed the Heavenly Bao True God for not being able to catch Yi Xing. Looking at the Heavenly Bao Continent in front of him, the anger in his heart grew stronger. The Dark Star Emperor shouted, "Break! I want this Star Secret Realm to be completely destroyed and disappear forever." In just 2 breaths, Yi Xing passed through the space tunnel and appeared in a vast starry sky. Below Yi Xing's feet, there was a huge meteorite. It was bare and still in the starry sky. In front of him, there was a void. In the distance, there were countless stars. Among them, from the nearest to the furthest, there were 3 stars that were especially bright. Beside Yi Xing, there was a slight ripple in the void. A man in a red robe appeared. The man in the red robe had exquisite facial features, as if he was a sculpture. He was unbelievably handsome. Yi Xing's reaction was not weaker than that of a beginner quasi-god. However, he did not sense the handsome man in the red robe who had suddenly appeared. The handsome man in the red robe sighed. "It's been 20,000 years. Finally, someone has come to the last level of the Stellar Hall." Hearing the voice, Yi Xing realized that there was someone beside him. He was shocked. Yi Xing immediately stepped back. He looked at the handsome man in the red robe and asked, "Who are you?" The handsome man in the red robe also looked at Yi Xing. "I'm the weapon spirit of the Stellar Hall, Xing Chun. For millions of years, only a few people have been able to come to the last level of the Stellar Hall. It's really lonely. Junior, you have to work hard. Don't be like those useless people who couldn't even pass the first level." It was the real Stellar Hall's weapon spirit, and not the imitation weapon spirit of Stellar Hall that Mr. Tortoise had. Even the silver dragon sky-shooting bow that real god Tiangong had left behind was a supreme-grade divine weapon. As Stellar Hall was a treasure of Stellar Hall, it was definitely a supreme weapon of a higher grade. The weapon spirit of the supreme weapon Yi Xing was in awe. Junior Yi Xing greets Senior Xing Chun. Xing Chun nodded slightly. He looked at Yi Xing with a joyful expression. A supreme-grade imperial body, 2 supreme astrological aspects, and the chaos whole astrological aspect that can devour others' heavens will to improve the grade of your own astrological aspect. Yi Xing, you are the most talented person I've seen in the past millions of years. It seems that you have hope of passing the test. Chapter 904. Yi Xing's expression suddenly turned into shock. Even reincarnation supremacy did not see that he had a supreme celestial form. However, the weapon spirit star could see through it at a glance. It was unbelievable. Moreover, the weapon spirit star recognized Yi Xing's supreme celestial form. The supreme celestial form that he had always called the black hole celestial form was not called the black hole celestial form, but the chaotic whole celestial form. What shocked Yi Xing even more was that the weapon spirit star had explained the functions of the chaotic whole celestial form. Devouring other people's fates and absorbing energy to strengthen the celestial form was Yi Xing's most crucial trump card. It was what he relied on to compete with any genius. The weapon spirit star smiled faintly at Yi Xing's reaction. "You don't have to be so nervous. The Star Palace is a world of its own. As the weapon spirit, I can do anything. You can't hide any secrets from me. Not only can I see your celestial form, but I also know that there is a true god of archery's soul will in your body that is monitoring your every move." Yi Xing was shocked. The true god of archery's soul will? The weapon spirit star raised its hand, and a ray of light was sucked out of Yi Xing's body. It was a small figure that looked exactly like the Dark Star Emperor. The weapon spirit star squeezed its hand, and the figure was crushed into nothingness. Knowing that the Dark Star Emperor's soul was in his body, Yi Xing's doubts were finally resolved. It seemed that the Dark Star Emperor had attacked the Heavenly Bao continent because of Yi Xing. Before Yi Xing entered the Heavenly Bao continent, he had used the Supreme Celestial form, the Chaotic Whole Celestial form. Since the Dark Star Emperor's soul was in his body, the Dark Star Emperor must have known about it at that time. Yi Xing was terrified when he thought about the soul hidden in his body that was like a pair of eyes that were constantly monitoring him. Yi Xing hurriedly expressed his gratitude to Star. "Thank you, Senior Star." Xingchen waved his hand and said, "I haven't moved for millions of years, so I'm really lonely. If you can complete the test, you can take me everywhere in the future. That would be the greatest gratitude." Yi Xing said confidently, "Junior will do his best to complete the test." The device spirit nodded with a smile. "This is the last level of Star Palace. It's the final test left by Star Sovereign. There are 3 tests in total. Do you see the 3 brightest stars in the sky? There's a test on each star. Only after passing the test on the first star can you proceed to the next star. If you pass all the tests on the 3 stars, you'll get the real legacy of Star Sovereign." Yi Xing had already noticed the 3 brightest stars in the sky. His eyes were filled with excitement. Then Star took out a token and handed it to Yi Xing. The time limit for each test is 60 years. If you don't complete the test after 60 years, you'll be automatically teleported out of the Star Secret Realm. If you encounter any life-threatening danger during the test, you can crush the token and give up on the test. You can be teleported out of the Star Secret Realm directly. Yi Xing, are you ready? Yi Xing took the token and said, "I'm ready." Xingchen waved his hand. "Then the test begins now. Remember, only after you complete the first test will you be able to see the rest of the path. There will be no instructions for the test. Everything is up to you. Go." A void passage appeared in front of the meteorite. It led to a faraway place and connected to the nearest shining star. After the weapon spirit star finished speaking, it disappeared without a trace. Yi Xing bowed respectfully in the direction where Star Artifact Spirit Star had disappeared. He then entered the void tunnel and flew forward. In the void passage, there was a void current. Yi Xing flew along with the void current. He could travel tens of thousands of miles in one breath. His speed was more than 10 times faster. Even so, the distance between him and the first shining star was still terrifyingly far. Yi Xing didn't know how many billions of kilometers he had to fly for 5 days to reach it. It was a real star. It was a round planet. It wasn't a square continent like Yi Xing had seen before. No matter where Yi Xing had been before, whether it was the star continent or the outer realm star continent, they were all square continents. They weren't round planets. Only the astrological signs, except for some special signs, were round planets. Moreover, there was one more thing that was different from the star continent Yi Xing had been to. There was no space barrier around this planet. Instead, it was protected by an atmosphere. Beyond the atmosphere was the starry sky. Compared to the outer realm star continent, which was millions of miles in radius, or the star continent, which was tens of millions of miles in radius, this planet was very small. Yi Xing's god eyes could easily see through the entire planet. It was less than 100,000 miles in diameter. There was only one continent on the planet's surface. It took up about 30% of the planet's surface. The rest of the planet was an ocean with some small islands scattered in the ocean. Yi Xing stood outside the atmosphere. First, he used his god eyes to check the entire planet. He checked both inside and outside. However, he didn't find any clues leading to the next star. He also didn't know what the test on this planet was. After a while, Yi Xing shifted his focus to the continent. There were many ferocious beasts living in the ocean. On the continent, there were many humans. Although the continent was only 30% of the planet's surface, it was still tens of thousands of miles in radius. There were hundreds of millions of humans living there. After observing for a while, Yi Xing had a rough understanding of the human society on this planet. The humans here also practiced martial arts. The strongest martial artist was a quasi-god. The king realm was very common. The entire continent was unified by a divine dynasty called the Dawei Divine Dynasty. Yi Xing stood high in the clouds and looked down at the earth. His god eyes were everywhere. After a while, he had a rough idea of the Dawei Divine Dynasty's system. The Dawei Divine Dynasty was different from any other regime Yi Xing had seen. It was a dynasty with absolute centralization of power. The emperor was the emperor, and civil and military officials ruled the world. It was a bit like the feudal dynasties on Earth. The regimes that Yi Xing had seen in the various star continents in the martial arts world were all authoritarian. The sect forces maintained the regime, and the large and small sect forces ruled the world. However, the Dawei Divine Dynasty didn't have any sect forces. It only had the government and the imperial court. Yi Xing guessed, "The ocean is vast, but there are only countless ferocious beasts. It shouldn't have much to do with the test. There are many humans on the continent, and the Dawei Divine Dynasty has unified the world. Could it be that the first test has something to do with the Dawei Divine Dynasty?" There were no hints in the first test. The test depended on oneself. Although Yi Xing understood a lot with his god eyes, he still didn't have a clue. Chapter 907. The Greenwood sect leader quickly returned to Yi Xing, his face full of shock. You killed the governor of the eastern state? You're a 9-star king." The Greenwood sect leader stared at Yi Xing in disbelief, his voice full of shock. "Can't a 9-star king kill a 2-nirvana quasi-god?" Yi Xing's tone was extremely calm, as if he had done something extremely ordinary. Yi Xing had killed a 2-nirvana quasi-god when he was an 8-star king. Now that he was a 9-star king and had cultivated the stellar glass art, his strength had undergone tremendous changes. Killing a 2-nirvana quasi-god was indeed a piece of cake for him. He did not even use the chaos whole celestial form to kill the governor of the eastern state. SKT. There has never been a 9-star king in the Dawei Divine Dynasty who could kill a 2-nirvana quasi-god. The Greenwood sect leader's voice was still shocked, but his eyes were filled with hope. "You killed the governor of the eastern state so easily. Your strength must have reached the level of a 3-nirvana quasi-god. Only the emperor of the Dawei Divine Dynasty is a 3-nirvana quasi-god. If you can kill the emperor of the Dawei Divine Dynasty, you can replace him, become the emperor, and start a new divine dynasty." Although the Greenwood sect leader was a quasi-god in the Dawei Divine Dynasty, he did not have a deity position conferred by the emperor. He was an evil god. It was not easy to cultivate to become a quasi-god. In the martial world, the strong were respected. A quasi-god expert should be high and mighty, and not become an evil god because of a person's words and live a sneaky life under the pursuit of the imperial court. The Greenwood sect leader naturally hated the emperor of the Dawei Divine Dynasty. Yi Xing shook his head. "I'm not interested in becoming the emperor, nor am I interested in starting a divine dynasty. As long as the emperor of the Dawei Divine Dynasty doesn't provoke me, I'll live in peace with him." The Greenwood sect leader said, "The governor is the governor of a territory. The entire Dawei Divine Dynasty is divided into 9 states, and there are only 9 governors in total. They are the highest deity positions conferred by the emperor. You killed the governor of the eastern state, so the emperor of the Dawei Divine Dynasty will not let you go. It's impossible for you to live in peace." The leader of the Greenwood sect was right. Emperor Dawei would never let Yi Xing go. The viceroy's deity position conferred by Emperor Dawei contained the will of the emperor, allowing him to govern the world on behalf of the emperor. The fall of the eastern state's viceroy was immediately sensed by Emperor Dawei. The death of the governor was a major event in the Divine Dynasty. The emperor of Dawei immediately sent out an imperial edict to lead the civil and military ministers, the 6 ministers, and the imperial guards to the eastern state through the transmission array. After Yi Xing killed the eastern state's governor, he did not leave. Not long after, Emperor Dawei arrived with his men. At this time, the Greenwood sect leader had already fled. He did not dare to confront the emperor of Dawei. Otherwise, if Yi Xing was defeated, only death would await him. The civil and martial ministers, the ministers of the 6 ministries and the commander of the imperial army were all 2nd nirvana quasi-gods. Their deity positions were comparable to that of the 9 states' governor. These 18 people were the highest deity positions bestowed by the emperor of great might. In addition, the soldiers of the imperial army were all kings. 1,000 soldiers formed an army, and each army commander was a quasi-god, one nirvana. The Dawei imperial army was divided into 36 armies. The emperor of Dawei personally led half of the imperial army, a total of 18 armies and 18,000 soldiers. The emperor of Dawei looked at Yi Xing from afar. His expression was dignified, and his voice was loud and clear. "Is it you who killed the eastern states governor that I appointed?" Yi Xing's expression was normal. Although the opponent had a quasi-god 3 nirvana, 9 second nirvana quasi-gods, 18 first nirvana quasi-gods, and more than 10,000 kings, Yi Xing was not afraid at all. Yi Xing looked at the emperor of Dawei and said, "He was courting death. Emperor of Dawei, don't follow in his footsteps." "How dare you?" the emperor of Dawei roared, and a terrifying aura erupted. He looked at the commander of the imperial army. "Commander, I'll leave this thief to you. You must capture him alive and extract his essence to refine the longevity pill." The commander of the imperial army bowed respectfully. "Yes, Emperor." After getting up, the commander of the imperial army swept his gaze over the imperial army. "First to 9th armies, follow me to capture this thief alive." Half of the 18 imperial army soldiers remained motionless while the other half followed the commander of the imperial army's orders and flew out in unison. The 9 armies of the imperial army spread out, each led by a quasi-god 1 nirvana. They formed a 9-palace formation that trapped Yi Xing within. The commander of the imperial army was at the eye of the 9-palace god-trapping formation. He gathered the power of the formation, greatly increasing his strength as he looked down on Yi Xing. The Grand Marshal of the imperial army was originally a 2nd nirvana quasi-god, but with the addition of 10 first nirvana quasi-gods and 9,000 kings, his strength had increased by a large margin. He was now comparable to a 3rd nirvana quasi-god. Moreover, the formation trapped the enemy. Unless one had the power to break the formation, they would not be able to escape. Any 2nd nirvana quasi-god surrounded would have no way to escape. Whether they could be killed or captured was up to the array's master. The commander of the imperial army released his astrology, and the other 10 quasi-god commanders and 9,000 soldiers also used their astrology. More than 9,000 astrology lit up the sky like a river of stars. "Thief, why haven't you surrendered yet?" the commander of the imperial army roared, using his voice to intimidate. Under the might of the army, a single roar would cause the will of an ordinary person to crumble, and their heart to tremble in fear. Yi Xing's eyes focused, and his gaze suddenly became sharp. A terrifying aura erupted as 2 beams of starlight soared into the sky. He had used the vermilion bird astrology and the Sagittarius astrology at the same time. The flame arrow on the azure sandalwood divine bow had long since been drawn, and the power of the 2 celestial manifestations was terrifying to the extreme. The power contained in the flame arrow was much stronger than when it had killed the eastern province governor. It had completely reached the level of a quasi-god 4th nirvana. "You won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Attack!" the commander of the imperial army roared. He put on his divine glove and extended his hand, which transformed into a 10,000-foot-long hand that descended from the sky and grabbed at Yi Xing. The other 10 quasi-god commanders, and the 1,000 imperial army soldiers behind them joined together to form chains of energy that shot toward Yi Xing kill. Yi Xing's killing intent erupted. With a roar, the flame arrow left the bow and transformed into a 10,000-foot-long astral arrow. The might of this arrow was peerlessly terrifying, not one bit weaker than the attack of a quasi-god for nirvana. The descending astral hand was instantly shattered by the flame arrow. The flame arrow's momentum was like a rainbow as it continued toward the commander of the imperial army. At the same time, the azure cloud wings appeared behind Yi Xing's back. Using his minor success true intent of wind, he began to move like a ghost. The 10 energy chains all brushed past Yi Xing as he dodged them all. While it seemed like Yi Xing had narrowly avoided the attacks of the energy chains, in truth, Yi Xing had controlled his speed perfectly, not wasting a single bit of energy. He had just managed to avoid the attacks of the 10 energy chains. The commander of the imperial army did not have Yi Xing's speed. Although he had the support of the array and his strength had reached the level of a quasi-god 3 nirvana, making it impossible for the spatial binding energy to restrain him, he still had no time to dodge the arrows. Chapter 9:13. Yi Xing racked his brains. If there was no other way, even if he hid in the palace, once the 60 years were up, he would fail the second test and be teleported out of the star-secret realm. Humans would only come up with new ideas when they were forced into a corner. Yi Xing racked his brains for a few hours. Suddenly, an idea popped up in his mind. If he combined the different Dao intents into one, would he be able to unleash an even stronger power? Currently, when Yi Xing attacked, he was able to fuse the Wind Dao True Intent, Fire Dao True Intent, and Darkness Dao True Intent into his attacks. However, this was just 3 types of energy converging together and not fusing with each other. Even though the power was greatly increased, there wasn't a qualitative breakthrough. Yi Xing was thinking that if he could fuse the different true intents of the great Dao into one and become an inseparable whole, its might should be much stronger. It was like 2 ropes. The strength of intertwined ropes was much stronger than when they were placed side by side. The more Yi Xing thought about it, the more he felt that it was feasible. Every true meaning of the Great Path was extremely mysterious and contained extremely powerful might. If he could fuse different true meanings of the Great Path into one, the collision of the mysterious forces would definitely be able to produce a miracle of 1 + 1 greater than 2. A type of true intent represented a type of great Dao. The fusion of true intents was a collision between Dao and Dao. The resulting power was extremely mysterious and miraculous. Yi Xing didn't know that this kind of power was called a mystique in martial arts. Divine abilities required great wisdom, great perception, and even great fortune in order to create them. Even for true divinity powerhouses, it was extremely rare for them to be able to create divine abilities. However, Yi Xing had a super brain. His brain's calculation speed was faster than a true god. To him, the only thing he was afraid of was not having a path and a direction to advance. Once there was a direction to advance, the super brain's existence would be greatly reduced. The mysterious Dao intents of wind, Dao intents of fire, and Dao intents of darkness were scanned by the super brain into data. The data was extremely complicated. With the brain power of a quasi-god, it was impossible to study it. However, in Yi Xing's super brain, it was orderly. Yi Xing tried to fuse the data of the 3 true intents together. In the end, it was so complicated that even Yi Xing's super brain couldn't handle it. If the data of the 3 true intents were all 10, then when they were fused together, there would be a total of 10 times by 10 times. There would be a total of 1,000 types of true intents, and the difficulty would be increased by 100 times. If the numbers were all 100, then when they were combined together, it would be 100 times 100 times 100 permutations. There would be a total of 1 million permutations, and the difficulty would be increased by 10,000 times. Yi Xing had already comprehended the 3 true meanings of darkness, wind, and fire to minor completion. The super brain had turned them into data, and the information was extremely complicated. There were more than billions of them. The difficulty of fusing the 3 true meanings was billions of times more difficult. It was no wonder that even the super brain found it strenuous. There were so many combinations that the super brain would need a long time to sort them out. After many attempts, Yi Xing decisively stopped fusing the 3 true intents and changed it to fusing 2. After many more attempts, Yi Xing set the fusion target as the true intents of fire and darkness. Perhaps it was because of his astrology. The vermilion bird astrology contained the path of fire, while the chaos hole astrology contained the path of darkness. Yi Xing could clearly feel that the true intents of fire and darkness were the most compatible with his body. The difficulty of fusing them was also the lowest. However, even if the difficulty was the lowest, the fusion of 2 true intents was still extremely complicated. A true god could live for 30,000 years, and those who could create divine abilities were 1 in a million. From this, it could be seen that even if the difficulty was lower, it was only relatively speaking. It still required a long time of experimentation, exploration, and verification. The true intents of darkness and fire kept colliding and fusing. Time passed as he failed again and again. As time passed and the number of attempts increased, there would occasionally be a glimmer of hope, and a partial fusion would occur. However, for two different true intents to truly fuse into one, it was obviously impossible to rely on a partial fusion. The slightest change would cause the partial fusion to fall apart, and it would be extremely unstable. However, even if it was only a partial fusion, Yixing could still feel a powerful and surging power. He could imagine that if he could really fuse them completely, the power of the two true intents would definitely be able to erupt. It would not just be an addition. With the partial fusion phenomenon, Yixing would occasionally leave the space in the hall and fight with the iron-winged golden demon condor that was guarding outside the replica of Stellar Hall. He wanted to verify his results in battle. The dual verification of theory and practice could speed up the speed of success and save him a lot of detours. Yixing would only leave the space in the hall once in a while. There was only one iron-winged golden demon condor guarding outside. However, as time passed, Yixing's fusion of the two true intents became more and more effective. When he left the space in the hall, the number of times he fought with the iron-winged golden demon condor became more frequent. The more effective the fusion of true intents became, the stronger the power. Yixing's killing power towards the iron-winged golden demon condor became greater and greater. The iron-winged golden demon condor couldn't take it anymore and gradually increased its guarding power. It went from 1 to 2, and then to 3. Yixing had been immersed in the fusion of true intents. He had almost forgotten about the passage of time. To him, a month or a year had passed in the blink of an eye. 6 years later, a certain day had arrived. Yixing's superbrain had fused the true intents of darkness and fire countless times. Along the way, there were countless partial fusions. Finally, on this day, the fusion of the two true intents showed a qualitative improvement. It fused together stably. Although the fusion of the two true intents couldn't be considered perfect, it was more than 90% complete. The fusion of the two true intents was inseparable. The power it contained was terrifying even to Yixing. Yixing stretched out his finger. A black flame arrow shot out from his fingertip. This black flame arrow was as black as ink and scorching hot. It was formed by the fusion of the true intents of darkness and fire. Its power was terrifying. It also contained the power of the Tao of archery, and had extreme penetrative power. Once this black flame arrow penetrated the defense, the damage it would cause would be absolutely devastating. Looking at the black flame arrow, Yixing said slowly, "You're formed by the fusion of the true intents of darkness and fire. I'll call you the Dark Fire Arrow." The Dark Fire Arrow sounded like a very ordinary name. However, the power it contained was definitely not ordinary. Looking at the Dark Fire Arrow, Yixing took a deep breath. His face lit up. Now, it's time to take care of these iron-winged golden demon condors. With a thought, Yixing left the space in the hall. The replica of the Stellar Hall shrunk, and was put away by Yixing. At this moment, there were 3 iron-winged golden demon condors guarding the replica. Their reactions were extremely fast. The moment Yixing appeared, their sharp eyes locked onto him. Chapter 9:14. The 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors shrieked at the same time, notifying the other iron-winged golden demonic condors, and attacking Yixing at the same time. One of the iron-winged golden demonic condors slashed at Yixing's waist, while the other reached out for Yixing's head. The last one had a sharp beak like a sword, aiming for Yixing's chest. If he was hit, Yixing's body would instantly shatter into pieces, and he would die instantly. Facing the attacks of the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors, Yixing's lips curled into a smile, his expression full of confidence. Whoosh! The azure cloud wings appeared behind him, and Yixing used the wind shadow escape technique to retreat rapidly. At the same time, Yixing stretched out his hand and pointed 3 fingers in succession, using the dark fire arrow. 3 pitch-black flame arrows shot out, respectively shooting towards the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors. 3 screams rang out at the same time. Whether it was the iron-winged golden demonic condors, or the golden demonic condor's beak, they were all destroyed by the dark fire arrow. The dark fire arrow looked like a pitch-black arrow, but the power it contained was too terrifying. The iron-winged golden demonic condors could not withstand it at all, and all of them retreated as if they had been electrocuted. However, the terror of the dark fire arrow had only just begun. The dark fire arrow was extremely fast, and directly shot into the bodies of the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors. The bodies of the iron-winged golden demonic condors were rapidly pulverized from the inside out. Even though the iron-winged golden demonic condors had abundant vitality, at this moment, it was like a torrential river, and they lost 50 to 60% of their vitality in the blink of an eye. More than half of the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors' bodies had been pulverized. Although they had regrown their flesh, their eyes were filled with fear. The destructive power of the dark fire arrow was too terrifying. At most, 2 arrows were enough to kill an iron-winged golden demonic condor. It was a long story, but Yi Xing's battle with the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors had only lasted for about 2 breaths. At this time, the iron-winged golden demonic condors had just rushed out of the mountain. The 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors did not dare to continue fighting Yi Xing, and turned to retreat at the same time, and fled. At the same time, they let out an impassioned scream. This scream was different from the previous one. It was clearly a warning to their companions. Yi Xing raised his hand, and the azure sandalwood divine bow instantly appeared in his hand. Swoosh! Whoosh! Whoosh! 3 arrows were shot consecutively. Yi Xing was using a mystique, and not the gray flame void annihilation arrow art. He did not need a second to condense the arrow. The dark fire Dao arrow could be released instantly. The 3 dark fire Dao arrows were more than twice as fast as the Ironwing Golden Fiend condors. They caught up to the 3 fleeing Ironwing Golden Fiend condors in an instant. After being attacked by the dark fire Dao arrow for the second time, the life force of the iron-winged golden fiend condors was instantly destroyed. Their flesh turned into granules, and they could no longer regrow their flesh. They all died. Before the rest of the iron-winged golden demonic condors arrived, the 3 iron-winged golden demonic condors guarding outside the Star Hall had already lost their lives. This result shocked all the iron-winged golden demon condors. Whoosh! After Yi Xing killed the 3 iron-winged golden fiend condors, he flew towards the rest of the iron-winged golden fiend condors. He drew his bow continuously. The azure sandalwood divine bow shot out dark fire Dao arrows one after another. The iron-winged golden fiend condors could not withstand the attacks of the dark fire Dao arrows at all. Even their sturdiest claws could not withstand the attacks. The iron-winged golden fiend condors that were hit by the arrows all screamed in agony. The terror of a mystique was not only in the strength of the attack, but also in the profoundness of the power. Unless there was an absolute suppression of cultivation, there was no way to withstand it. Just a touch would cause great damage. All the iron-winged golden fiend condors flew out of the stone mountain and charged towards Yi Xing. They screeched and their ferocious nature was on full display. With the mystique that Yi Xing had created, these iron-winged golden fiend condors were no longer worth mentioning. He drew his azure sandalwood divine bow repeatedly and shot out dark fire Dao arrows one after another. None of the iron-winged golden fiend condors could withstand them. The iron-winged golden fiend condors would be severely injured by 1 arrow and their vitality would be greatly damaged. 2 arrows would kill them. Yi Xing drew his bow again and again. How fast was Yi Xing? In the blink of an eye, several iron-winged golden fiend condors were killed. In less than 10 breaths, more than half of them were dead. Although the iron-winged golden fiend condors were ferocious, they were also terrified at this moment. They did not dare to fight anymore and fled. Yi Xing shot arrows continuously. The speed of the dark fire Dao arrows was much faster than the iron-winged golden fiend condors. In the blink of an eye, a few more iron-winged golden fiend condors were killed. Whoosh! Yi Xing used the azure cloud wings and the wind shadow mystic evasion technique. In a breath he chased after them. His speed was even faster than the iron-winged golden fiend condors. He chased after them one by one. Not long after, all the escaping iron-winged golden fiend condors were killed. The 36 iron-winged golden fiend condors on this planet were all dead. Rumble. The stone mountain that the iron-winged golden fiend condors lived in suddenly changed. It bloomed with brilliant light that rushed into the sky and extended into the depths of the starry sky. Yixing was right. The second trial tested one's strength, and the 36 iron-winged golden fiend condors were the targets. Once the 36 iron-winged golden fiend condors died, the second trial was considered completed. The passage to the third trial planet appeared immediately. In front of Yixing, the void rippled, and the artifact spirit Xingchen appeared again. Looking at Yixing, the artifact spirit Xingchen's eyes were filled with joy. Very good. Very good. Very good. You were able to create divine abilities when you were a 9-star king. You have completed the second trial. This was the first time Yixing had heard about divine abilities. He was puzzled. What is a divine ability? The artifact spirit Xingchen said. The fusion of different great Tao intents will form a divine ability. Those who can create divine abilities are extremely rare even among true gods. Continue to work hard and persevere. I look forward to seeing your figure at the end. After saying this, the artifact spirit Xingchen smiled at Yixing and disappeared. So the dark fire Tao arrow that I created is a divine ability? It is extremely rare for true gods to create divine abilities. No wonder the dark fire Tao arrow is so terrifying. The iron-winged golden fiend condor's vitality is more than 1,000 times greater than mine, but they were still killed by the dark fire Tao arrow in 2 shots. For someone with my vitality, 1 shot from the dark fire Tao arrow can kill thousands of people. How terrifying. Yixing was pleasantly surprised and shocked. He was extremely excited. After taking a few deep breaths, Yixing calmed himself down and looked toward the void passage that led to the depths of the starry sky. The first trial tested one's temperament. The second trial tested one's strength. The third trial should be different from the first 2. I wonder what it will test. Yixing thought to himself as he entered the void passage. Following the void current, Yixing's speed increased by more than 10 times as he flew toward the planet of the third trial. Compared to the distance between the first and second trial planets, the distance between the second and third trial planets was even greater. After flying for an entire month, Yixing finally arrived at the planet of the third trial. Yixing was sent directly to the planet of the third trial. There were raging flames on both sides, and there was only a small path that led forward. Yixing stood at the beginning of the path. The flames on both sides were more than 10 feet tall, and they were extremely hot. Yixing looked around with his void-piercing god eye and his face was filled with shock. Chapter 9:15. Yixing's void-breaker god eye had actually lost its effect, and it was no different from what he could see with his naked eyes. The void-breaker god eye had a total of 3 levels. When Yixing cultivated the first level, he could see through space. Even if it was a starry sky continent with a radius of hundreds of millions of miles, the void-breaker god eye's vision could still penetrate it. However, the flames on both sides had the effect of blocking the vision of the void-breaker god eye. Yixing's void-breaker god eye could not see through these flames. The path in front of him was not a straight line. After just a few dozen meters, it curved a little to the right. Therefore, the path ahead of him was still filled with flames, and the void-breaker god eye could not see through it. The flames on both sides were extremely hot. Yixing used the minor success true meaning of the fire Tao, but he could not block it. Even if he stimulated the starfire seed, he could not attract it. This burning sensation caused Yixing to feel bursts of pain. Although with the vitality of a top-grade imperial body, this burning sensation could not affect Yixing's life, but it still felt very uncomfortable. Yixing wanted to go up to the sky and stand above the flames to look at this planet. However, he found that the void was shrouded in an invisible force. As long as his feet left the ground, this invisible force was like a mountain that could not be lifted. It immediately pushed Yixing back to the ground. On this flaming planet, one could not fly, nor could one use eye techniques to see through it. Everything was unknown, and there was only a small path leading to the front. Yixing stared at the small path for a while before his eyes shifted to the flames on the side. He then stretched out his right hand and reached into the flames. A sharp pain immediately spread. As soon as Yixing's palm came into contact with the flames, it was immediately incinerated into ashes. As if he had received an electric shock, Yixing immediately retracted his right hand. His flesh and blood wriggled and regrew a new palm. Looking at the flames on both sides, Yixing's eyes were filled with dread. These flames were so terrifying that if he entered, he would soon be incinerated into ashes. Even if his flesh and blood regrew, he would not be able to hold on for long. Yixing's gaze once again turned to the path that led to an unknown destination. Other than following the path forward, there seemed to be no other feasible path. Yixing took a step forward. Because his legs couldn't leave the ground at the same time, he couldn't use his speed at all. Every step he took was the same as a normal person's, only about half a meter away. Every time Yixing wanted to increase his speed, when his feet left the ground at the same time, the invisible force would suppress him. Yixing had no choice but to walk forward step by step like an ordinary person. At this speed, he would probably only be able to travel a little more than 100 miles in an entire day. However, Yixing's current flying speed was 3,000 miles in a breath. This meant that the distance he could cover in a breath would take him about a month. Yixing's current speed was like a tortoise crawling. It was too slow, but he could only walk slowly. There was nothing he could do. This feeling of having strength but not being able to use it was very sullen. Yixing took a deep breath and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He adjusted his mood and maintained his calm. He followed the path and walked forward step by step. This path was always winding. The straight line distance never exceeded 100 meters. Yixing couldn't see the situation in front of him. He could only explore like a blind man, walking forward in an unknown direction. As he walked, Yixing was constantly alert, guarding against the flames on both sides of the path. There might be some danger. However, apart from boredom, there wasn't any danger along the way. From the beginning of the meteorite to the first planet, from the first planet to the second planet, from the second planet to the third planet, Yixing had experienced a long period of boring flying. Especially from the second planet to the third planet, Yixing had flown through the void passage for a full month. Having experienced these boring experiences, Yixing's resistance to boredom was still quite strong. Moreover, when cultivators cultivated, they would sometimes go into closed-door cultivation for a year or so, or even several years at a time. They were naturally able to endure loneliness, so Yixing did not feel too bored during the first few months of his journey. However, after Yixing had walked on this path of flames for over a year, the environment was still the same. There were eternal flames on both sides, and there was no end in sight. Yixing felt a sense of dejection in his heart. Along the way, Yixing had been in high spirits at the beginning. He had always been on guard against any danger that might appear from the flames on both sides. But after walking for over a year, there was no danger at all. There was only boredom and loneliness. The first stage tested one's temperament, the second stage tested one's strength, and this third stage should be a test of perseverance. Thinking back to the past year, he had been walking on this path of flames. There had been no danger, no obstacles, and besides being a little slow, the path had been smooth. There was only loneliness and boredom accompanying him. It was irritating and depressing. Thinking that this stage should be a test of perseverance, the dejection in Yixing's heart immediately dissipated. His eyes flashed and his fighting spirit continued to soar. The first and second stages were already difficult. No matter what, he couldn't fail in this third stage. Since it was a test, there had to be an end to this path. Step by step, Yixing walked forward. His heart was filled with hope. As long as he completed this stage, he would be able to obtain Sovereign Star's inheritance. Yixing was filled with incomparable anticipation for the inheritance of a sovereign. And this anticipation turned into motivation, driving Yixing forward and maintaining a high fighting spirit. Time slowly passed as Yixing walked step by step. Another year passed. On both sides of Yixing were eternal flames, and in front of him was a path with no end in sight. The end of this path is just ahead. Sovereign Star's inheritance is waiting for me. Yixing's spirit was always in an excited state. The light of hope in his eyes didn't extinguish as he continued forward. The fourth year, the fifth year, the sixth year, time passed year after year. Yixing kept walking forward on the path of flames. Even though he kept repeating that Sovereign Star's inheritance was waiting for him in front, He still hadn't reached the end after walking for a full 7 years. He couldn't help but feel mentally and physically exhausted. His dejection was becoming more and more obvious. Did I make a mistake? Could this be an illusion? Could this path actually have no end and I won't be able to finish it even if I walk to my death? As time passed, the thoughts in Yi Xing's mind became more and more complicated. He began to doubt himself and no longer firmly believed that Sovereign Star's inheritance was waiting for him in front. Yi Xing felt his legs getting heavier and heavier. The difficulty of taking a step was much more difficult than at the beginning. This was due to mental exhaustion. Stop. This path has no end at all. All your efforts are in vain. Continuing forward is also in vain. A voice began to appear in Yi Xing's mind. His body and mind were exhausted. He wanted to listen to this voice and stop right there. Chapter 9:17. Just stay here and refine the Sovereign's blood. Once you're done, you'll receive the Sovereign's inheritance left behind by Star Sovereign. The artifact spirit, Xingchen, said before disappearing. Yi Xing looked at the golden blood in front of him with excitement. It took him a while to calm down. Letting out a long breath, Yi Xing sat on the ground and circulated the stellar glass art. The stellar glass art was the inheritance left behind by Star Sovereign. Obviously, it was a cultivation method that Star Sovereign had practiced before. The power in Star Sovereign's blood was very close to the stellar glass art. Yi Xing felt the vast energy in the Sovereign's blood as soon as he circulated the stellar glass art. The astral power contained in that tiny drop of golden blood was as vast as the sea, unfathomable and boundless. With the absorption of the stellar glass art, a large amount of astral power surged out of the Sovereign's blood and was absorbed by Yi Xing. At the same time, Yi Xing also used the chaos whole celestial aspect to produce a powerful devouring power to absorb the energy in the Sovereign's blood for his own use. With this two-pronged approach, Yi Xing's cultivation base stabilized and advanced rapidly, making rapid progress. A 9-star king needed to accumulate a large amount of astral power to become a first nirvana quasi-god. Although Yi Xing had been a 9-star king for 24 years, he had been going through trials in the Star Secret Realm for 24 years. Therefore, his cultivation didn't improve much. He was only in the middle stage of the 9th rank. At this moment, Yi Xing's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. In just 2 hours, he reached the late stage of the 9th rank. Half a day later, he reached the peak of the 9th rank. After another day of absorption, Yi Xing finally touched the limit of the Star Sea Realm and felt the barrier of the Star Nirvana realm. The astral power in his body was enough to undergo nirvana. The limit of the Star Sea realm meant that whether it was Yi Xing's meridians, star vortexes, or even his flesh and blood, they were all filled with astral power. He couldn't absorb any more astral power. Only by undergoing nirvana and undergoing a qualitative change in his body could he absorb more astral power. Yi Xing stopped absorbing. The stellar glass spell was a supreme divine art, and it had its own nirvana method. It was more thorough and safer than the nirvana method of ordinary divine arts. Nirvana of flesh and blood. Yi Xing shouted in his heart as he used the nirvana technique. The first 3 nirvanas of the star nirvana realm were all nirvana of the flesh and blood. Then the flesh and blood on Yi Xing's body, starting from his fingertips and toes, began to shatter into tiny particles. Then they shattered into even tinier leptons, reaching a level that was invisible to the naked eye. Under the observation of the naked eye, the flesh of Yi Xing's hands and feet gradually shattered and disappeared, leaving only the bones. The process of nirvana was very slow. It was already very dangerous for the body to be crushed into particles. If it was crushed into leptons, it would be even more dangerous. One had to be careful and proceed step by step in an absolutely safe environment. One could not be impatient at all. First the hands, then the legs, then the torso, and finally the head. After an entire day, Yi Xing's flesh and blood had completely shattered into leptons, invisible to the naked eye. Yi Xing was only left with bones, but there was a flame in his skull. That was the flame of life. The space between the eyebrows and the sea of consciousness were all hidden in this flame of life. Normally, the flame of life was invisible and traceless, hidden in the flesh and blood. However, When the flesh and blood melted, the flame of life would reveal itself. This flame of life was the source of life for Yi Xing's flesh and blood. It was because of the flame of life that the leptons could maintain their vitality and reform the body. If someone were to sneak attack at this time and extinguish the flame of life, the leptons would lose their vitality and turn into ashes. The body would be completely destroyed. And without the source of life, the flesh and blood would not be able to regrow. Because of this, the nirvana process required an absolutely safe environment. Yi Xing's soul force was powerful, and his flame of life was exuberant. His flesh and blood leptons were extremely active. With the flame of life as the center, they spread out in all directions, forming a powerful life force field. If someone with great vision focused their mind, they would barely be able to see with the naked eye that the air around the skeleton seemed to distort. This was the trajectory of the life force field. Under the control of the life force field, Yi Xing's flesh and blood leptons gradually shattered and reformed. The newly formed flesh and blood leptons were much more active than the old ones. Leptons were the smallest form of life. Flesh nirvana was to first turn the flesh and blood into leptons, then gradually nirvana, making the flesh and blood leptons more powerful. Then the more powerful the flesh and blood leptons would form a body. Naturally, it would have a qualitative breakthrough compared to the previous body, because this was a fundamental change. The nirvana process of the flesh and blood leptons lasted for an entire day. Finally, all the flesh and blood leptons had undergone nirvana, and began the final step of the nirvana process, the reconstruction of the flesh and blood. The flesh and blood leptons first condensed into flesh and blood particles, and then the flesh and blood particles condensed into flesh and blood, forming different organs or body parts. When the flesh and blood decomposed, it started from the ends of the limbs and ended at the head. The reconstruction of the flesh and blood was the opposite, starting from the head and ending at the ends of the limbs. After a day, Yi Xing's flesh and blood were completely reconstructed and restored to normal. The entire nirvana process took 3 days. 1 day of decomposition, 1 day of nirvana, and 1 day of reconstruction. Yi Xing looked exactly the same as he did 3 days ago, but his essence had undergone earth-shaking changes. 3 days ago, Yi Xing was a 9-star king. Now he had successfully undergone nirvana, and was a 1-nirvana quasi-god. He had completed the transformation from the star sea realm to the star nirvana realm, turning from a king to a god. The star sea realm and the star nirvana realm were major watersheds in martial arts. A king was still considered a mortal, but a quasi-god had the word god in it, and was a god. Yi Xing's aura had an additional ethereal aura, which was the aura of a god. Yi Xing could feel the surging vitality and terrifying power in his body. His divine body was built with the supreme grade imperial body, and it was built with the supreme grade divine arts nirvana art, so its power was shocking. Although the supreme grade divine body represented powerful vitality, and could be reborn with a drop of blood, the power it contained couldn't be underestimated. If Yi Xing encountered the iron-winged golden demonic condors in the second stage, he didn't need to use the dark fire Dao arrow. Yi Xing was sure that he could kill an iron-winged golden demonic condor with just one punch with the terrifying power in his divine body. Yi Xing's gaze fell on the golden blood floating in front of him. The astral energy he had absorbed from the golden blood had already allowed him to undergo nirvana, turning from a 9-star king to a quasi-god. However, the golden blood didn't seem to have shrunk by much. The energy Yi Xing had consumed probably wasn't even 10% of the total amount of the golden blood. The energy contained in a drop of supreme blood is indeed surging. No wonder Senior Xingchen said that it was enough for me to undergo nirvana several times. That's right, Yi Xing thought to himself. He used the stellar glass art and the chaotic whole cosmic aspect to continue absorbing the blood. Chapter 9:18. The energy contained in a single drop of Sovereign's blood was too vast. In just 7 days, Yi Xing had reached his limit as a first nirvana quasi-god, and could undergo a second nirvana. As for the golden blood, it had only shrunk a little, less than 40% of its original size. 3 days later, Yi Xing succeeded in his second nirvana. Half a month later, Yi Xing reached his limit as a second nirvana quasi-god, and began his third nirvana. 3 days later, Yixing became a third nirvana quasi-god. In a total of about a month, Yixing had undergone 3 nirvanas, and his star glass art had advanced to the 2nd level. However, the golden blood had not been completely exhausted. There was still a small drop floating in front of Yixing, about 20% of the total. Yixing continued to use the star glass art to refine and absorb. 7 days later, he finally absorbed all of the astral energy in the sovereign's blood. Yixing's 3rd stage star nirvana cultivation had been greatly consolidated. However, he was still far from undergoing 4 nirvanas. After 4 nirvanas, he would become a mid-tier quasi-god. Moreover, from the 4th nirvana onwards, not only would his flesh undergo nirvana, but his bones would also undergo nirvana. The amount of energy required would naturally be much higher than the previous 3 nirvanas. Yixing stood up and felt the surging energy in his body. The vigorous divine energy felt like a dream. A month ago he was only a 9-star king. Now he was a 3rd nirvana quasi-god. This kind of progress was truly inconceivable. Advancing by leaps and bounds was not enough to describe it. All of this was because of a single drop of sovereign's blood. This allowed Yixing to gain a deeper understanding of sovereigns. Sovereigns of the martial Tao were indeed worthy of being called sovereigns. A single drop of blood was already so terrifying. It was unimaginable how powerful their true bodies would be. The space in front of Yixing rippled, and the artifact spirit star appeared once more. Seeing your star. Yixing nodded slightly. Very good, very good. You've gone through 3 nirvanas, yet you still have quite a bit of sovereign's blood left. It can be seen that your attainments in archery are quite good, and your compatibility with the star sovereign's blood is very high. Now that you possess the star sovereign's bloodline, you can obtain the true inheritance left behind by the star sovereign. Yixing's eyes lit up. The artifact spirit continued. Star sovereign left behind 2 secret manuals and 2 treasures for his successor. The 2 manuals are the Sovereign Level Cultivation Technique, Star Glaze Technique, and the Sovereign Level Body Technique, Star Immortal Body. The 2 treasures are the Sovereign Level Talisman, Realm Breaker Talisman, and the Sovereign Level Artifact, Star Palace. As soon as it finished speaking, Xingchen waved its hand and 3 items appeared in front of Yixing. 2 jade slips and 1 astral talisman. Yixing's heart surged with excitement. The 4 items left behind by the Star Sovereign were all sovereign-level treasures. Even for true gods, they were rare treasures. In the Flowing Light Boundary, the Dark Star Divine Palace, the Radiance Divine Palace, and the Star River Divine Palace, these 3 5-star forces could take out a few top-grade divine-grade treasures, but they did not have a single supreme-grade treasure. It was clear how rare supreme-grade treasures were. This was because only sovereigns had sovereign-level treasures. The first 2 jade slips recorded the Star Glaze Technique and the Star Immortal Body. The Astral Talisman was naturally the Realm Breaker Talisman. As for the Star Palace, Yixing was currently in the Star Palace. Yixing put away the 2 jade slips and the Realm Breaker Talisman. Xingchen continued, I'll give you the Star Glaze Technique, the Star Immortal Body, and the Realm Breaker Talisman. However, you can't take the Star Palace yet. Star Sovereign used the Star Palace as the formation core to set up the Star Secret Realm. You have to cultivate the Star Glaze Technique to level 7 and above before you can take the Star Palace out of the Star Secret Realm. Yixing was surprised. Level 7 of the Star Glaze Technique? That's the highest level. Even true gods can't cultivate to level 7. Xingchen glanced at Yixing, who said that the Star Glaze Technique only has level 7? Level 7 is indeed difficult for true gods, but that's only for normal true gods. If you're good enough, true gods can cultivate to level 9. Level 9? The inheritance of Star Glaze spell that Yixing had received from real god Tiangong only had 7 levels. He immediately took out the jade slip that recorded Star Glaze spell, and used his mental power to scan the contents into his super brain. Xingchen was right. The Star Glaze Technique did have 9 levels. The 7th level of the Stellar Glass spell was a top-grade divine grade item. Only the 9th level of the Stellar Glass spell was complete, and its grade was Supreme Grade. The Stellar Glass spell left behind by Star Sovereign was complete, while True God Tiangong had only obtained an incomplete one. Real God Tiangong cultivated the star glaze technique to level 7 and was invincible in the flowing light world. If he cultivated to level 9, his power would be unimaginable. Yi Xing took out the jade slip that recorded the star immortal body and scanned the contents into his brain. He was even more shocked. The star glaze secret art was a cultivation method, while the star immortal body was a body technique. Yi Xing was shocked by its ability to strengthen his body. It was terrifying. The star immortal body only had 4 levels. Once cultivated to level 1, the body would be as strong as a middle-grade divine weapon. Level 2, the body would be as strong as a high-grade divine weapon. Level 3, the body would be as strong as a divine weapon. The 4th layer was the highest level. The toughness of the body was even more shocking. It could reach the toughness of a supreme weapon. Yi Xing did not know how strong a supreme weapon was, but he was sure that a real god would not be able to damage it. Yi Xing knew how strong a middle-grade divine weapon was. Without using special methods, a quasi-god below the 7 nirvana would not be able to damage a middle-grade divine weapon. Even a real god would find it difficult to destroy a middle-grade divine weapon. This meant that as long as one cultivated to level 1 of the star immortal body, he could stand still and let a quasi-god attack him. His defensive power was insanely strong. In addition, Yi Xing's divine body was a supreme weapon. His vitality was extremely strong. He could be reborn from a drop of blood as soon as he cultivated the divine body. In other words, if his body was damaged until there was only a drop of blood left, he could rebuild his body. If Yi Xing's body was as strong as a middle-grade divine weapon, who could destroy it until there was only a drop of blood left? By then, even a real god would not be able to kill him. As for the boundary-breaking talisman, as a supreme treasure, it must have an extremely heaven-defying function. From its name, Yi Xing could see the function of the boundary-breaking talisman. It should be able to bring people through the space between realms, just like how the great space-breaking talisman could bring people through the space of the starry sky continent. The artifact spirit said, "You have obtained the star sovereign's inheritance. If others knew about it, you would be killed for sure. Countless true gods would want to kill you and steal your treasures." Therefore, the star sovereign had left behind a will that whoever obtains his inheritance must cultivate the star immortal body to the 1st level in order to leave the star secret realm. That way, you would be able to protect yourself even when facing true gods. Furthermore, in order to avoid death, he had also left you with the Breaking Boundary Talisman. The Breaking Boundary Talisman can take you to another realm and save you from a life-threatening danger. Chapter 924. In this round, Yi Xing's opponent was Lu Xingwu, a quasi-god 6 nirvana. Quasi-god 6 nirvana was the highest level of cultivation among the core disciples. Of all the core disciples in the Dark Star Divine Hall, there were only 6 quasi-gods 6 nirvana. In this battle, Yi Xing's arena was still the focus of everyone's attention. In the previous battles, Yi Xing had won very easily and had not shown the limits of his strength. But in this battle, his opponent was Lu Xingwu, a quasi-god 6 nirvana. Everyone guessed that Yi Xing would be in for a tough battle against such a powerful opponent, and the limits of his strength would be exposed. Even so, it was still unknown whether Yi Xing could win this battle and enter the top 8. Unfortunately, everyone's guess was once again completely wrong. Yi Xing and Lu Xingwu's battle was not as tough as they had expected. Yi Xing used the medial quality divine weapon, the Azure Sandalwood Divine Bow, and used the Ashen Flame Void Annihilating Arrow art to break through Lu Xingwu's attack with 1 arrow, break through Lu Xingwu's defense with 2 arrows, and send Lu Xingwu flying with the 3rd arrow, spraying blood across the sky. Yi Xing won, and easily at that, defeating his opponent with 3 arrows. This result was beyond everyone's expectations, and they were all dumbfounded. Yi Xing's strength was not just on par with quasi-god 6 nirvana, it was far superior. High in the clouds, the Dark Star Emperor's expression turned unsightly. He had organized the strongest core disciple competition not to know Yi Xing's strength, but Yi Xing's vitality. However, the strength of one's vitality was not as easy to determine as one's cultivation. If the Dark Star Emperor wanted to know Yi Xing's vitality, he would have to see how Yi Xing recovered from his injuries. Moreover, This was not something that could be determined by a small injury. It had to be a serious injury. But up until now, Yi Xing had entered the top 8. And yet he had not been injured in the slightest. Moreover, not only was he completely unscathed, but he had also completely crushed his opponents. Even Quasi-God 6 Nirvana opponents were no exception. If Yi Xing hadn't been injured, this competition would have been held in vain. How could the Dark Star Emperor be happy? Gao Man stood beside the Dark Star Emperor, and knew what he was thinking just by looking at the Dark Star Emperor's expression. Soon the battles in the other arenas also ended. The top 8 had been decided, and the inner court deacons quickly arranged the list of participants for the next round. 4 more arenas were taken away. In this round, Yi Xing's opponent was another quasi-god of 6th Nirvana. However, it was not one of the 3 people who were much stronger than ordinary quasi-gods of 6th Nirvana, such as Shui Baotong, Gu Kaiyang, or Su Tianyi. The strength of the opponent in this round was about the same as Lu Xingwu. Yi Xing used the Azure Sandalwood Divine Bow and executed the Grey Flame Void Annihilation Arrow technique, easily obtaining victory and entering the top 4. Shui Baotong, Gu Kaiyang, and Su Tianyi were indeed geniuses who could fight above their level in the quasi-god realm. They also defeated their opponents and entered the top 4. The next round would be the semi-finals of the top 4. 2 more arenas were taken away. Arena number 1, Shui Baotong vs Su Tianyi. Arena number 2, Yi Xing vs Gu Kaiyang. The inner court deacons quickly arranged the list of participants and announced it. Shui Baotong glared at Yi Xing and entered arena number 1 with Su Tianyi. Yi Xing also glanced at Shui Baotong and entered arena number 2 with Gu Kaiyang. 45 years ago, when Yi Xing broke through to the 9-star king level and went to the Heavenly Bao continent, he was intercepted by Shui Baotong and exposed his supreme astrology, which was discovered by the Dark Star Emperor. This year's Strongest Core Disciple competition was a rare opportunity to vent his anger on Shui Baotong, but he didn't encounter it. Even in the semi-finals of the top 2, they were not assigned to the same arena. It was a pity. Shui Baotong's mentality was similar. He was extremely confident in his own strength. Even if Yi Xing's performance was extremely heaven-defying, he still had enough confidence to defeat Yi Xing. He couldn't wait to enter the same arena with Yi Xing and beat Yi Xing up. Both of them wanted to beat the other up, and this dream had come true. In the semifinals, Shui Baotong and Yi Xing both won. Shui Baotong and Su Tianyi's strength was similar. The two of them exchanged more than 100 moves before Shui Baotong seized the opportunity to defeat Su Tianyi. Yi Xing and Gu Kaiyang's battle was about the same. Gu Kaiyang's strength was much stronger than Lu Xingwu's. Yi Xing didn't use any new trump cards, still using the Azure Sandalwood Divine Bow, the Azure Flame Void Annihilation Arrow Art, and the Vermilion Astrology. Then, with the help of the Wind Shadow Divine Evasion Technique Speed, he defeated Gu Kaiyang with great difficulty. Shui Baotong and Yi Xing both won with great difficulty. Everyone judged that their strength should be about the same. In this final battle, it wouldn't be easy to determine the winner. However, the Dark Star Emperor was very clear in his heart. Yi Xing had the supreme astrology, but his true strength hadn't been revealed yet. Although the Dark Star Emperor's expression was ugly, he wasn't completely helpless. He looked at Gao Man. Gao Man received the signal and said loudly, "The Strongest Core Disciple competition is about to usher in the final battle. The winner will be the Strongest Core Disciple, and will receive the Divine Emperor's Nirvana Divine Pill as a reward. Such an important battle naturally can't be missed. The Divine Emperor has decided that the final battle will be held in 2 hours. In these 2 hours, the two of them will have a good rest, recover their energy, and face the final battle in their best condition. Moreover, the final battle is related to the Nirvana Divine Pill, and cannot be easily decided. The Divine Emperor has given special permission that the final battle can be held without any rules. It can be a life and death battle without any scruples." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The final battle could be held without any rules. It meant that even if one of them killed the other in the final battle, it would be under the Divine Emperor's orders, and wouldn't be punished by the palace's rules. Everyone could already smell the smoke of the final battle. Hearing this, Shui Baotong's eyes lit up with joy. He had always wanted to kill Yi Xing. Now, with the Divine Emperor's order, he could finally kill Yi Xing in the competition. His heart was filled with joy. As for Yi Xing, he was also filled with killing intent. Since the Dark Star Emperor had given the order, he didn't have any scruples. He could use this opportunity to take revenge. After Gao Man gave the Divine Emperor's order, he disappeared. Then the inner court elder Shui Yinan also disappeared from his seat. Not long after, Gao Man returned to the Dark Star Emperor's side. Shui Baotong was summoned by Shui Yinan and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yi Xing frowned slightly, thinking that Shui Baotong would definitely play some tricks. He immediately activated his void-piercing divine eyes and looked at Shui Yinan and Shui Baotong. Shui Yinan first took out a high-grade divine weapon and gave it to Shui Baotong. Then he took out a mid-grade divine armor and a short spear that shone brightly. It was a divine-level forbidden weapon that contained terrifying power. Shui Yinan said to Shui Baotong, "The Divine Emperor's order is for you to use the Qi-Long divine armor to protect yourself. First, use the high-grade divine weapon to injure Yi Xing. If you can't, use the forbidden weapon, the bloodthirsty divine spear. Do you remember?" Chapter 928. Celestial Cloud Palace, a quiet room at the back of the palace. Yi Xing calmed his mind, took out the Nirvana divine pill, and swallowed it. The surging medicinal power was quickly absorbed by Yi Xing. His limbs, bones, flesh, and blood were all strengthened by the medicinal power of the Nirvana divine pill. Yi Xing's quasi-god third Nirvana cultivation base grew stronger and stronger. When the pill entered the body, the medicinal power would automatically spread, and absorption was much faster than refining the sovereign's blood. In less than an hour, Yi Xing's cultivation base had already stabilized to the limit of quasi-god third Nirvana. There was still a large amount of medicinal power in his body, enough for him to undergo the fourth Nirvana. Starting from the ends of his limbs, Yi Xing's flesh began to shatter. This time, it was not only his flesh that underwent Nirvana, but also his bones first. His flesh and blood shattered into life particles, and then into life leptons invisible to the naked eye. Only his bones were left. Then his bones also began to shatter from the ends of his limbs. This time, because his bones were also shattered, the speed of his divine body shattering was much slower than the previous 3 Nirvanas. It took a full 2 days to complete the shattering. Yi Xing's body had completely disappeared, and even his bones did not exist. Only a flame of life was left floating in the void, representing that Yi Xing's life had not been extinguished. Yi Xing's flesh, blood, and bones had all turned into life leptons. With the flame of life as the center, the life leptons formed a life force field, constantly shattering and reforming, undergoing Nirvana. With the addition of the bones undergoing Nirvana, the Nirvana process this time took longer than the previous 3 Nirvanas, lasting for 2 days. 2 days later, all the life leptons were reborn, and the Nirvana rebirth began. The third step, the reconstruction of the body. First was the reconstruction of the skull, then the bones of the body, and finally the bones of the limbs. The reconstruction of the bones of the entire body was complete, and compared to before the Nirvana, there was a layer of luster. Whether it was density or strength, there was a qualitative change. Then the reconstruction of the flesh began. First, it was the head, then the body, and finally the limbs. The whole process took another 2 days. After a total of 6 days, Yi Xing's fourth Nirvana was completely completed. His godly spirit aura had undergone a qualitative upgrade, and he was now a quasi-god of Nirvana. This was a breakthrough from a beginner quasi-god to a mid-tier quasi-god. Outside the quiet room, the Dark Star Emperor had been using the surveillance formation to observe every movement in the quiet room. As Yi Xing's Nirvana neared, the Dark Star Emperor became happier and happier. When he saw that Yi Xing had completed his Nirvana, the Dark Star Emperor's joy reached its peak. He was extremely excited, and his eyes were filled with desire. It was as if hope was right in front of him, and he could grab it with a stretch of his hand. Ha 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 ha. The Dark Star Emperor couldn't contain his joy and laughed heartily. It was as if he could see the scene of him becoming a supreme being. At that time, he would not only be the divine emperor of a country, but also the lord of a realm. He would be a supreme existence that could traverse countless realms. Amidst his laughter, the Dark Star Emperor entered the quiet room. At this moment, the Dark Star Emperor no longer concealed his inner thoughts. He looked at Yi Xing with a gaze that revealed his desire and ruthlessness. In the eyes of the Dark Star Emperor, Yi Xing was a turtle in a jar, a little lamb waiting to be slaughtered. There was no room for resistance. Even if Yi Xing's strength had reached the level of a true god, the Dark Star Emperor didn't care. He was a 10-star true god. He didn't even care about Kyohoshi, let alone ordinary 1-star, 2-star and 3-star true gods. He could casually pinch them to death with a stretch of his hand. Yi Xing's gaze also looked at the Dark Star Emperor. It was also different from before. He knew that the success of his nirvana was the time for the Dark Star Emperor to tear off his mask. There was no need for him to continue to be respectful to the Dark Star Emperor. Yi Xing also didn't treat someone who wanted to snatch his supreme astral form as his master. Instead, he treated him as a mortal enemy. Yi Xing's consciousness was connected to the boundary-breaking talisman. His divine power wrapped around the boundary-breaking talisman. He could leave at any time with a thought. Therefore, Yi Xing didn't feel the slightest bit nervous when looking at the Dark Star Emperor. Yi Xing's lips curled into a smile. Dark Star Emperor, you've finally torn off your mask and are going to make a move on me? The Dark Star Emperor's expression was surprised. There was something wrong with the development of this plot. His gaze had so blatantly expressed his thoughts. Yi Xing should be surprised, puzzled, scared, puzzled, and so on. Why did he have such a confident and omniscient look? The Dark Star Emperor was shocked. How do you know what I'm going to do to you? Yi Xing chuckled. You're just after my supreme astral form, aren't you? You want to transfer my supreme astral form into your body so that you can use it to become a supreme being. The Dark Star Emperor's heart trembled. From what Yi Xing said, it seemed that Yi Xing even knew that he had the astral form diversion technique. You really know a lot. The Dark Star Emperor's expression quickly returned to normal. He sneered. However, even if you know, what's the use? You've been under my surveillance all this time and have nowhere to run. Now you're like a turtle in a jar. What power do you have to resist? The Dark Star Emperor's smile gradually turned sinister. If you don't know, you'll feel better for a while. Now that you know, won't every day be like a year? Won't your heart be filled with pain and only despair? Yi Xing smiled. His expression was calm. Your Excellency, Divine Emperor, do I look like I'm in pain and filled with despair? The Dark Star Emperor stopped smiling. His gaze was like an arrow as he stared at Yi Xing. It was as if he wanted to see through Yi Xing. Could it be that you can still escape from the palm of my hand? Yi Xing smiled mysteriously. Divine Emperor, don't look at me. I'm someone who has entered the Star Secret Realm. How can you understand the methods of a Star Supreme? Hearing this, the Dark Star Emperor's expression changed greatly. Yi Xing's expression was too confident. He was starting to believe that Yi Xing had indeed obtained some kind of escape treasure in the Star Secret Realm. Whoosh! The Dark Star Emperor spread out his 5 fingers. 5 streaks of godly power shot out, turning into 5 divine dragons that charged towards Yi Xing. The space in the quiet room instantly froze. The power of space imprisonment was much more terrifying than Yi Xing's power. Even an ordinary true god wouldn't be able to move. The Dark Star Emperor's attack was as fast as lightning. He wanted to capture Yi Xing. In the blink of an eye, the 5 divine dragons had tightly bound Yi Xing. If Yi Xing had any methods, he wouldn't be able to use them at all. However, Yi Xing was already prepared. He didn't need to use the boundary-breaking talisman at all. He only needed to think about it. No matter how powerful the Dark Star Emperor was, he wouldn't be able to stop Yi Xing from thinking about it. In the blink of an eye, the boundary-breaking talisman was activated. A bright ray of light instantly shot out from Yi Xing's body, breaking through the obstruction of space and shooting towards the sky. The 5 divine dragons that were coiling around Yi Xing's body instantly shattered. Yi Xing's figure instantly disappeared along with the ray of light. The Dark Star Emperor was shocked. He immediately shuttled through the void and chased after the ray of light. However, in the blink of an eye, he lost track of Yi Xing. Chapter 931. Yi Xing looked at True God Wu Jiu curiously. Black yellow spiritual energy? What is that? True God Wujio said. Black yellow spiritual energy is the origin energy of the world when the universe was first created. It is the origin of all the great daros of the universe. A wisp of black yellow spiritual energy is enough for me to reach the middle stage of the star god realm from the early stage. Quasi-gods were at the star nirvana realm, and the star god realm was the true god realm. True God Wujio's voice was filled with anticipation, and his eyes were full of hope. It was obvious that he longed for the black-yellow spiritual energy. According to True God Wujio, the black-yellow spiritual energy was the best treasure for warriors to cultivate. It was extremely effective for both quasi-gods and true gods. Yi Xing was also tempted by the black-yellow spiritual energy. Yi Xing asked, "Big brother, since you have heard that the black-yellow spiritual energy has appeared in the silver star boundary, why don't you go and take a look?" True God Wujio shook his head. The black-yellow spiritual energy is located in the black-yellow space. In the black-yellow space, the universe is not yet formed, and the space is chaotic. There are space cracks everywhere, and there are even space storms. For a one-star true god like me, there is a high chance of death. Moreover, many two-star true gods and three-star true gods of the star origin continent have entered the black-yellow space because of the black-yellow spiritual energy. The number one expert, the sect master of the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect, even brought along the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect's most precious treasure, the primeval chaos Golden Cauldron there. Moreover, I have heard that the true god experts of the Milky Way continent have also gone there. The Milky Way continent even has Kyuhoshi. If a one-star true god like me were to enter the black-yellow space, not to mention the dangers of the black-yellow space, even if I were to encounter other true god experts, I would still be dead. I can't go. In terms of strength, Yi Xing was confident that he was stronger than a one-star true god. In terms of physical strength and vitality, he was far superior. Moreover, his speed was unparalleled, and he was not inferior to a true god expert. Yi Xing felt that perhaps he could enter the black-yellow space and try his luck. Yi Xing smiled. "I wonder where the mysterious yellow space is located?" Real God Wujio said. "The mysterious yellow space is ethereal and without a trace. It is not fixed at a certain place. Instead, it moves around the silver star boundary. However, if you want to find it, it is not impossible to find it. The mysterious yellow spiritual energy is extremely pure, and it is the origin of all things. As long as you are near the mysterious yellow space, you will definitely be able to feel the aura of the mysterious yellow spiritual energy. Then, you will be able to find the specific location of the mysterious yellow space through the aura of the mysterious yellow spiritual energy." After saying that, Real God Wujio waved his hand and shook his head. "It's useless to say all these. I can't enter the mysterious yellow space and neither can you. Let's talk about something more practical. Is there anything that you want in the Xingxian auction 3 days later?" Although Wu Jiuzhen thought highly of Yi Xing, and believed that Yi Xing was a top quasi-god, he didn't compare Yi Xing to a true god. Yi Xing chuckled. Naturally, he wouldn't say that he wanted to go to the mysterious yellow space. "For the auction 3 days later, I only want the divine feather green gold. It doesn't conflict with what you want, right?" Real God Wujio was slightly surprised and said, "The divine feather green gold is a high-grade divine level material. It is very expensive. Unless you sell the only high-grade divine weapon you have, how can you afford it? What you want is the healing divine pill, the regeneration creation pill." Yi Xing was only a 4 nirvana quasi-god. As for the divine feather green gold, it was a treasure that even true god experts would fight over. Real God Wujio was very doubtful whether Yi Xing had enough money to buy it. Yi Xing was happy that it didn't conflict with what Real God Wujio wanted. He said, "Other than the divine feather green gold, I am not interested in the other auction items. Brother, why don't we go to the auction together 3 days later?" True God Wujio found it harder and harder to see through Yi Xing's depth. He only felt that Yi Xing had extraordinary potential. True God Wujio was only an ordinary one-star true god. He was very satisfied to be friends with a quasi-god with great potential. This meant that he might have a true god as a friend in the future. "Okay, We will go to the auction together 3 days later. I have a VIP card. You can enter with a ticket at that time and just follow me in. True God Wujio patted his chest and agreed. Although he was only an ordinary one-star true god, he was still a true god. He was an existence that stood at the pinnacle of martial arts in the Xingyuan continent. There were less than 100 true gods in the entire Xingyuan continent. He was one of them. His status was naturally respected, and he was a VIP at the auction. 3 days later, Yi Xing and True God Wujio arrived at the Xingshuan auction house. The staff at the auction house respectfully welcomed True God Wujio inside. As a True God VIP, he naturally had the right to bring others in. Yi Xing and True God Wujio walked side by side. They were also respectfully received by the staff at the auction house. The Xingshuan auction house was held once every 1,000 years. Its scale was huge. A king could only attend the auction once in their lifetime. Moreover, they did not have the right to enter. Even a quasi-god's lifespan was limited. They could only attend a few auctions. True God experts, on the other hand, had a lifespan of 30,000 years. They could attend many auctions. Therefore, every True God expert had their own VIP room. True God Wujio's VIP room number was 087. For the Xingyuan continent, where there were less than 100 true gods, the number 087 was really at the back. True God Wujio brought Yi Xing into VIP room 087. Although it was ranked towards the back, the facilities inside were not simple and crude. Instead, they were extremely luxurious. Furthermore, there were 4 beautiful female king maids who were dressed in alluring attire that could captivate one's mind. Lord True God Wujio and Yi Xing had just sat down when the 4 maids approached them in pairs. One of them massaged their legs while the other massaged their shoulders. From the VIP rooms, one could see the scene in the auction hall through the projection of an array. The auction hall was an extremely large space. It was over 1,000 meters long and wide. There were over 10,000 seats inside. Each seat took up a large space. It was not crowded, but it could not compare to the luxury of the VIP rooms. Although quasi-gods and true gods were both gods, there was an almost insurmountable gap between the two. Their statuses were on completely different levels. The Xingshuan auction house was held once every 1,000 years. Quasi-gods could only attend it a few times in their lifetime. Therefore, every time it was held, the auction would be very lively. Although the true gods in the VIP rooms could bring some quasi-gods in, the ordinary seats in the auction hall were all sold out. As quasi-gods entered one after another, the auction hall was soon filled with people. The Xingshuan auction house had officially begun. In an auction, the more important an item was, the more it would be put at the end of the auction. Divine feather green gold, as a high-grade divine-level material, was abnormally precious. It would definitely be put at the end of the auction. Yi Xing narrowed his eyes. He had already seen the auction brochure. If the divine feather green gold did not appear, Yi Xing would not be interested. True God Wujio, on the other hand, was paying attention to the auction process. Apart from the regeneration creation pill, he also had his eyes on 2 middle-grade divine-level treasures. 4 middle-grade divine-level treasures, quasi-gods competed more than true gods. When True God Wujio made his move, others, including the true gods in the VIP rooms, did not compete too fiercely with True God Wujio. The 2 middle-grade divine-level treasures that they wanted both ended up in True God Wujio's hands. Chapter 939. As soon as real God Zhuanan came out of the dimensional void, he felt a strong murderous intent shrouding him. His heart trembled as he sensed the danger of death. Flame millstone protection. Real God Zhuanan immediately unleashed a defensive move. He used his gloves, which were top-grade divine weapons, and a millstone-like flaming palm energy covered his entire body. At the same time, he activated his divine power and formed a strong defensive shield. Previously, Real God Zhuanan had blocked the arrows that Yi Xing had shot out with such a defense. Real God Zhuanan already knew that Real God Jicheng was following the aura that he had left behind and would catch up with him soon. Real God Jicheng was one of the top 3 Real God elders in the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect. His fighting power was at the 3-star level. As long as he could stall Yi Xing for 10 breaths of time, Real God Jicheng would naturally be able to kill the arrow god when he arrived. Real God Zhuanan's plan was correct. However, he had not expected Yixing to be so much stronger than he had been outside Xingxian City. The dark fire path arrow instantly shot into the flaming millstone like palm strength, and penetrated it easily. Then it penetrated the divine power shield. Its power was still strong, and it shot into Real God Zhuanan's divine body. A real god's divine body had much stronger vitality than a quasi-god's divine body. At the very least, it was at the level of blood rebirth. Moreover, the sturdiness of a divine body was much higher than that of a quasi-god's divine body. However, Real God Zhuanan's divine body cracked when he was hit by the dark fire arrow. Especially at the spot where the arrow had hit, there was a bowl-sized hole. Moreover, the flesh at the edge of the hole was quickly disintegrating and turning into life particles. It had reached a stage where the flesh could not be reborn. If it was a disintegrated wound or flesh, it could be reborn. To a real god, such an injury was not considered an injury. There was no need to consume life force as the flesh could heal itself. However, if the flesh was disintegrated into life entropy and could not heal itself, it would have to consume life force to regenerate the flesh. Such an injury would damage life force. If this kind of damage was severe enough, it would consume a lot of vitality. When it reached a certain level, even the god body that had been regenerated from a drop of blood would lose its life. Regardless of whether it was the attributes of the silver dragon heaven-shooting bow, or the power of the divine ability itself, they all had extremely terrifying lethality. They were extremely destructive to one's vitality. When combined together, it was a devastating blow to a true god. In the blink of an eye, Real God Zhuanan felt that he had lost more than 50% of his vitality. Supreme Astral Form, Supreme Grade Divine Bow. Only then did true God Zhuanan realize that Yixing's astrology and divine weapons had changed. He was greatly alarmed. Coupled with the fact that his life force was rapidly fading away, he could feel the aura of death. His heart was filled with fear. Whoosh! Yixing shot out another arrow. This time it was the Wind-Fire Dao arrow. The speed of the Wind and Fire Dao arrow was even faster. Before Real God Zhuanan could fully recover from the injuries he had suffered from the Dark Fire Dao arrow, the Wind and Fire Dao arrow had already entered his body. It was so fast that Real God Zhuanan, who was severely injured, couldn't react in time. Real God Zhuanan let out a blood-curdling scream. This time, his divine body completely disintegrated. In a breath's time, his body had completely disintegrated into particles of life and scattered in all directions. A true god's life had fallen just like that. The supreme grade divine bow combined with the divine valor archery Dao arrow had terrifying lethality. Yixing was only a 4 nirvana quasi-god, and couldn't unleash the full power of the bow. However, he had still killed Real God Zhuanan with 2 arrows. If Yixing's cultivation was higher, and he could unleash the full power of the supreme grade divine bow and divine ability, he would have been able to easily kill an ordinary true god. Yixing could sense that the expert chasing after him was getting closer and closer. He used the divine eye of Voidbreaker, and saw the figure of the other party. This was an expert who was much stronger than Real God Zhuanan. Yixing waved his hand and grabbed Real God Zhuanan's relic. Then he continued to teleport through the void. In less than 10 breaths' time, Real God Jicheng appeared at the place where Real God Zhuanan had fallen. He opened his divine eye of martial arts, and could see the disintegrated particles of life that had yet to completely dissipate. He couldn't sense Real God Zhuanan's aura of life anymore. It was obvious that Real God Zhuanan had fallen. Real God Jicheng was both furious and surprised. Although Real God Zhuanan was only a 1-star real god, he was still a real god. Even if he were to attack, it would be easy to defeat Real God Zhuanan, but difficult to kill him. Who could actually kill Real God Zhuanan in such a short period of time? Although Real God Jicheng didn't think that he could kill Real God Zhuanan in such a short period of time, he still locked onto Real God Zhuanan with his mind and teleported along the space ripples. From Real God Jicheng's point of view, if the other party was really powerful, there was no need for him to escape. If he could kill Real God Zhuanan so quickly, he should have a treasure with great lethality. As for him, he was a 3-star real god. Some of the treasures with great lethality could kill a 1-star real god, but they might not be able to deal with a 2-star real god, let alone a 3-star real god. After all, no matter how great the lethality was, it would only be effective if it hit the target. In front of a true expert, no matter how great the lethality of the treasure was, as long as it wasn't powerful enough, it would be useless. After killing one, there's another. He's really persistent. The speed of this person's teleportation is even faster than real god's Wanan's. It's even faster than mine. If I continue to chase like this, he'll catch up with me sooner or later. Yixing was in a bad mood. Originally, he wanted to kill real god's Wanan quickly, so that he could escape. However, he didn't expect that the expert chasing after him would have such great mental strength. Although he was still far away, he had already locked onto his mind. Plus, after teleporting, the space ripples in the void wouldn't disappear instantly. The other party could follow the space ripples and chase after him. Qing Yun wings could increase one's movement speed greatly, but it didn't have much effect on teleportation. The reason why his teleportation speed was so fast was because of the penetrating power of arrow essence. That was why he was faster than an ordinary real god. In order to avoid being chased by the other party, Yixing shuttled through the space barrier continuously. Sometimes he would enter the starry sky continent. Sometimes he would enter the boundless void. He shuttled between different spaces. When he wasn't in the same space, it was much more difficult to lock onto his mind. However, the other party could still catch up with him through the space ripples. However, in that case, the other party had to follow the path that Yixing took when he shuttled through the void. The distance that Yixing could teleport was the same as the distance that the other party could chase after. Only then could they find the next space ripple. In that case, the speed of the other party slowed down. The two of them, one running and one chasing, shuttled through more than 10 starry sky continents continuously. When Yixing shuttled through the boundless void again, he suddenly felt a weak but extremely pure star spiritual energy. This is? Yixing's heart jumped, and he instantly recalled what real god Wujiu had said. Chapter 944. Clang. Yixing's body shot through the air like a cannonball, traveling tens of thousands of li in an instant. Yixing was well aware of the Chaos Golden Cauldron's approach. Since he couldn't avoid it, he naturally had to use the force of this collision to flee. His divine body was even tougher than a medial quality divine weapon, so he wasn't afraid of the opponent's attack. Thus, he didn't try to block it. Instead, he used the force of the collision to charge forward, instantly pulling away from true god Jin Ao. However, the Chaos Golden Cauldron's collision was truly frightening, and most importantly, it was also very profound. Even though Yixing's divine body was heaven-defying in defense, he still couldn't help but suffer tensome wounds that were deep enough to see bone and spurt blood. Wherever he passed, he left behind a long trail of blood that spilled for tens of thousands of li. However, Yixing's vitality was at the blood rebirth level. As long as his divine body had a single drop of blood left, he could be reborn. Although he had lost a lot of blood, his divine body was still there, and he still had a lot of divine blood in his body, so his injuries weren't that serious. In the blink of an eye, Yixing's injuries were healed, and he hadn't even consumed 1/10 of his vitality. From the moment Yixing was attacked by Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's arrow, to being sent flying by true god Jin Ao's Chaos Golden Cauldron, only the blink of an eye had passed. Yixing suffered continuous attacks. Although he was injured, he did not fall into an encirclement, and continued to flee. Whether it was the Quasi-God 7 Nirvana archer, or the 4-star true god sect master Jin Ao, they were both shocked. A mere quasi-god for Nirvana actually had such a powerful defense? Wasn't this divine body a little too heaven-defying? After being sent flying several hundred li by the Chaos Golden Cauldron, Yixing immediately changed directions and fled in the same direction as Quasi-God 7 Nirvana. Although changing directions allowed him to close the distance between him and true god Jin Ao, true god Jin Ao's speed wasn't enough to stop Yixing. At this moment, Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's archer fired another arrow. This golden arrow was like a divine spear that was 100 li long, traveling 100,000 li in a second. This person's arrow had been split into 9 in order to intercept Yixing, and he had succeeded. But now, Yi Xing was running in the opposite direction. If he wanted to stop Yi Xing, he would first have to shoot the arrow in front of Yi Xing, then change direction and shoot at Yi Xing. With his attainments in archery, it wasn't impossible, but Yi Xing's speed was too fast. If it was an ordinary true god who could travel 10 to 20,000 miles in a breath, he would definitely be able to circle around and intercept the arrow. However, Yi Xing could travel tens of thousands of miles in a breath. By the time his arrow reached the front, Yi Xing would have enough time to dodge, so there was no way he could intercept it. Therefore, he simply condensed his power and unleashed an extremely fast and powerful attack, hoping to kill him in one strike. No matter how fast Yi Xing was, he was not faster than this arrow. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xing was shot again. However, this time, the arrow was shot from behind. Yi Xing was hit by the arrow, and the impact of the arrow's power made him even faster. And although this arrow was powerful, it had not reached the level of a quasi-god for nirvanas, so the damage it could do to Yi Xing was limited. It only left a fist-sized hole in Yi Xing's divine body, which healed in the blink of an eye. True God Jin Ao and quasi-god 7 Nirvana's archer pushed their speed to the limit as they chased after Yi Xing. The other true gods also caught up, but they were clearly much slower than the two. Sect Master Jin Ding. Young Master Tian Yuan. True God Jin Ao and quasi-god 7 Nirvana's archer were clearly familiar with each other, and they greeted each other. The Sky Origin Divine Sect was a faction of the Milky Way continent, and one of the top factions. The standard of martial arts in the Milky Way continent was higher than in the Star Origin continent, and it could be compared to the Dark Star continent. As one of the top factions, the Sky Origin Divine Sect was much stronger than the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect. The sect master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect had only become a true god after 8 nirvanas. He was called Kyuhoshi, and he was close to 30,000 years old. His lifespan was approaching, and he only had 1 or 2,000 years left. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect was not the son of the sect master, but the disciple of the Sky Origin Divine Sect's sect master. He was the #1 genius of the Sky Origin Divine Sect after the current sect master. He had an 8-star blue fate, and he would be able to experience 8 nirvanas in the future. He had a chance to become Kyuhoshi, and he had already been designated as the young sect master. Once the sect master's lifespan was up, he would take over the position. Although the young master's current strength was not on par with True God Jin Ao's, his prospects were much better than True God Jin Ao's. As such, True God Jin Ao, the #1 expert of the Star Origin continent, was very humble in front of the young master. True God Jin Ao chased after Yi Xing and said, "Young Master Tian Yuan, if you catch the arrow god, I only want his life, and the black and yellow spiritual energy will be yours." This was the time to express his attitude. If the young master did not exist, True God Jin Ao would have been able to refine the black and yellow spiritual energy and become a 5-star true god. However, even if he became a 5-star true god, he would not be able to fight against the Sky Origin Divine Sect. Therefore, once the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect arrived, even if he snatched the black and yellow spiritual energy, it would be useless. Instead, he would lose his life. Therefore, he had to express his attitude early to prevent the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect from misunderstanding. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect and True God Jin Ao snorted coldly, and a look of disdain appeared on his arrogant face. "Arrow God? Humph! You dare to use such a title. Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? Fine, his life is yours, and the black and yellow spiritual energy is mine." As he spoke, the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect shot out another arrow. The golden arrow was like a divine spear, and in a breath's time, it caught up to Yi Xing. Yi Xing did not waste time dodging. He allowed the arrow to hit him, increasing his speed and increasing the distance between him and the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect wanted to attack Yi Xing with another arrow, but he could no longer do so. True God Jin Ao said, "Our sect has a 3-star true god guarding the entrance and exit of the bound of universe. Arrow God won't be able to escape. With our forces surrounding him, no matter how fast he is, he will eventually fall into our hands." The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect nodded. He took out the speed communication pearl and informed the other true gods of the Sky Origin Divine Sect to surround Huang Xiaolong. True God Jinao had the true gods of the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect circle around to the side. Unless Yixing went straight ahead, if he wanted to turn left or right, he would definitely be blocked by the true gods of both sides. Not to mention the fact that the black and yellow space had an end, it was impossible to keep going forward. Even the spatial storms that frequently appeared in the black and yellow space would have to make way for them. Therefore, they could not keep going forward. Moreover, the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect and the Sky Origin Divine Sect were top forces in their respective continents. They had a lot of power and had many allies. There were also many true gods of other sects that obeyed their orders and assisted in hunting down Yixing. Yixing had the black and yellow spiritual energy on him. This plaything was a treasure, but it was also a taunting halo. In fact, there was no need for the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect and the Sky Origin Divine Sect to mobilize. As long as the other true gods knew that the black and yellow spiritual energy was on Yixing, they would automatically join in the battle to surround Yixing. Now Yixing was like the black and yellow spiritual energy, surrounded and chased by a large number of true gods. However, the black and yellow spiritual energy did not have spirituality, while Yixing had consciousness. Moreover, Yixing had the god eye of Void Breaker. When he looked around, his line of sight was stronger than other true gods. Although there were many true gods surrounding him, he was able to escape from the encirclement several times. As the true gods of the black and yellow space gradually knew that the black and yellow spiritual energy was on Yixing, more and more true gods surrounded Yixing. It was harder for him to break out. I'll go all out today. There will be an update tonight. Begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.